Horror has always evolved alongside our fears. Every generation finds a new way to unsettle audiences, whether through monsters, psychological terror, or disturbing imagery that lingers long after the game has been finished. As a result, it becomes increasingly difficult for modern horror to surprise us. We've seen abandoned hospitals, haunted houses, and grotesque creatures countless times before, making genuine originality harder than ever. While many modern horror games continue to redefine familiar ideas, very few genuinely change or challenge our expectations of what horror should look or feel like. Instead, they often rely on darker environments, louder scares, or increasingly grotesque imagery, assuming that making something more extreme is the same as making it more frightening. That's exactly why Silent Hill F feels so refreshing. Rather than simply trying to be darker, bloodier, or more shocking than everything that came before it, it approaches horror from an entirely different angle. It understands that beauty can be just as unsettling as decay, transforming vibrant flowers, elegant landscapes, and dreamlike imagery into sources of genuine discomfort instead of comfort. In doing so, Silent Hill F doesn't just offer a fresh direction for one of gaming's most iconic and beloved horror franchises, it demonstrates that horror can still evolve in meaningful ways without abandoning the psychological foundations that made the genre so compelling in the first place. That's why I believe Silent Hill F doesn't just continue one of horror gaming's most iconic franchises, it redefines what modern horror can look and feel like. One of the biggest reasons Silent Hill F feels so different from other modern horror games is its setting. For decades, horror has conditioned us to fear places that are already broken. Crumbling hospitals, abandoned schools, decaying factories, and forgotten towns have become visual shorthand for danger. They tell players exactly how they should feel the moment they step inside. The environment itself often acts as a warning, signaling that something terrible has already happened before we've even taken our first steps. Silent Hill F takes the complete opposite approach. At first glance, its rural Japanese setting is almost quaint. Traditional wooden homes, quiet Japanese shrines, and narrow countryside paths create an environment that feels lived in rather than abandoned. It's peaceful, elegant, and undeniably beautiful in that lovable Japanese way, but it makes the horror that slowly consumes it feel even more disturbing. Instead of entering a world that's already frightening, players witness beauty becoming corrupted before their very own eyes. That contrast is what gives the game its unique atmosphere, proving that horror doesn't always have to emerge from decay. Sometimes watching something beautiful slowly become unrecognizable is far more unsettling because it challenges our natural instinct by association with comfort and safety. The setting isn't simply a backdrop for the horror, it's the very thing that makes the horror so effective, constantly forcing players to question whether they should admire what they're seeing or fear it. The game's use of Japanese culture and mythology reinforces that feeling at every opportunity. Rather than borrowing from familiar horror imagery from Western traditions, Silent Hill F grounds itself in folklore and symbolism that naturally complements its themes. Perhaps the most striking example is the constant presence of the red spider lily, a flower so deeply associated in Japanese culture with death, final goodbyes, and the journey into the afterlife. On their own, the flowers are elegant and captivating, yet understanding their symbolism transforms every field into something quietly ominous. They no longer exist simply as decoration, but become part of the storytelling itself, foreshadowing tragedy long before the player fully understands what's happening. Combined with the dense vegetation, mist-covered countryside, weathered shrines, and traditional Japanese architecture, the environment creates an atmosphere that's simultaneously calming and deeply unsettling. Every location feels carefully chosen, not only because it reflects rural Japan during the 60s, but because it naturally supports the game's emotional tone. Even players unfamiliar with the cultural significance behind many of these symbols can still feel that something isn't quite right. The game trusts its visual storytelling enough to let the setting communicate those emotions without constantly explaining itself, allowing curiosity and discomfort to grow naturally as players explore each new area. What makes this approach so significant is how naturally it supports the game's broader identity. Silent Hill F isn't frightening because it rejects beauty, it's frightening because it embraces it. Every flower, every quiet village street, and every carefully crafted traditional home reminds players that horror doesn't need to exist separately from beauty in order to be truly effective. Instead, the two emotions strengthen one another. The more inviting the world initially feels, the more disturbing it becomes as that beauty twists into something grotesque. That gradual corruption gives the horror far greater emotional weight because players aren't simply surviving a nightmare, they're watching a place that once felt alive slowly lose its own identity. It's a subtle but incredibly powerful distinction, one that few horror games of recent years have tried to attempt because it's far easier to begin with environments that are already hostile. Silent Hill F instead asks players to mourn the loss of beauty. That emotional response lingers long after individual scares have passed. That's why the setting feels like far more than just a change of scenery for the series. It's the foundation of the game's entire philosophy, demonstrating that horror can emerge from elegance just as much as powerfully as it can from darkness. In many ways, the world itself becomes the strongest argument for why Silent Hill F redefines modern horror, because it challenges one of the genre's oldest assumptions, that fear must always look ugly to be effective. What truly separates Silent Hill F from many modern horror games isn't just its setting, but the way it completely rethinks how psychological horror should be and is presented. For years, the genre has relied on familiar visual language to communicate fear. Dark corridors signal danger, rusted environments represent corruption, and grotesque monsters immediately tell players that something is wrong. These ideas are effective because they've been redefined over decades, but they've also become predictable. Players instinctively know what emotions they're expected to feel the moment they enter these spaces. Silent Hill F deliberately disrupts these expectations. Rather than immediately confronting players with decay and darkness, it surrounds them with vibrant colors, traditional Japanese architecture, and picturesque countryside before slowly allowing those elements to become increasingly unnatural. The horror isn't simply hidden beneath the surface. It gradually infects everything around it. That slow transformation creates an entirely different kind of psychological discomfort because players aren't reacting to environments that were always frightening, they're mourning the loss of places that once felt peaceful. Watching beauty become corrupted is often far more disturbing than walking into decay that was already there. This approach also allows the game to create tension without constantly demanding the player's attention through loud scares or relentless action. Some of the most memorable moments in horror aren't the ones that make us jump, but the ones that quietly linger in our minds long afterwards. Silent Hill F appears to understand this remarkably well. The stillness of the countryside, the empty village streets, and the gentle movement of flowers in the wind create an atmosphere that's almost meditative, encouraging players to lower their guard. Yet that same tranquility becomes deeply unsettling because it never feels entirely safe. Every beautiful landscape carries an underlying sense that something is fundamentally wrong, even if it's difficult to explain exactly what that is. It is an incredibly effective form of psychological horror because the fear comes from uncertainty rather than constant confrontation. The game trusts its atmosphere enough to let players absorb the environment, allowing the tension to build naturally instead of forcing it through endless encounters or exaggerated spectacle. That philosophy extends beyond the environments themselves and into the way Silent Hill F approaches horror as a whole. The Silent Hill series has always been at its strongest when the monsters, location, and symbolism reflects the emotional state of its characters, rather than existing purely to frighten the player. Silent Hill F continues that tradition while expressing itself through an entirely different cultural lens. Instead of repeating the industrialist rot, fog-covered streets, and familiar imagery that have become synonymous with Silent Hill, it uses Japanese folklore, symbolism, and rural landscapes to communicate many of the same emotional ideas. The result is something that feels both familiar and refreshingly original. It still captures the psychological heart of what makes Silent Hill, but it refuses to become trapped by the series' visual identity. That is an incredibly difficult balance to achieve, because moving too far away from established conventions risks alienating most of the franchise. Even still, Silent Hill demonstrates that the franchise can remain true to its themes without endlessly repeating its aesthetics. Ultimately, that's why I believe Silent Hill F represents such an important step forward for not just modern horror, but also Silent Hill as a franchise. It isn't trying to reinvent psychological horror by abandoning everything that came before it, nor is it simply recreating the past with prettier graphics. Instead, it asks a much more interesting question. What if horror didn't need darkness to make us uncomfortable? What if fear could emerge through elegance, color, and serenity just as effectively as through blood, rust, and decay? By building its entire identity around that idea, Silent Hill F creates an experience that feels genuinely distinctive within both the franchise and the wider horror genre. It's a reminder that innovation doesn't always come from making something louder or more extreme. Sometimes it comes from changing the way we look at something entirely. That's exactly what Silent Hill F achieves, and that's why its approach feels less like a simple evolution of the series, and more like a new blueprint for where psychological horror can go next. Silent Hill F succeeds because it understands something that modern horror tends to forget. Fear isn't created by darkness alone. While so many games continue to rely on familiar imagery of abandoned buildings, grotesque monsters, and decaying environments, Silent Hill F proves that beauty can be just as unsettling when it's used with purpose. Its traditional Japanese setting, symbolic use of red spider lilies, and quiet countryside don't exist simply to make the game look different from previous entries. They become essential parts of horror itself. It creates an atmosphere where elegance and terror constantly exist side by side. By allowing players to witness beauty slowly transform into something deeply disturbing, the game creates a form of psychological horror that feels both timeless and yet refreshingly original. That's why I believe Silent Hill F doesn't just represent a new direction for one of gaming's greatest franchises, it represents a new direction for horror itself. It honors the psychological foundations that have always defined Silent Hill, while proving that the genre doesn't need to remain visually trapped by its past. Sometimes the most effective way to evolve isn't by making something louder, bloodier, or more shockingly grotesque, but by simply changing the way we experience fear. Silent Hill F embraces that philosophy with remarkable confidence, and in doing so reminds us that the most haunting nightmares aren't always hidden in darkness. Sometimes they're waiting for us in the most beautiful places imaginable.
Oh,